Hello friends, welcome back to another video. You are going to have to forgive my voice because clearly I've got some sinusy things happening, but I wanted to get this video out to you because I recently attended that conference that I told you guys about in my last video, where it was like kind of an insider's guide, like VIP access to publishing, the publishing world, all about query letter writing and like literary agents and acquiring editors and what they do and what they're looking for. And as someone who recently finished their first draft of their book, my fantasy book, Project Souls, it is an adult contemporary fantasy, and I would love for it to get picked up by a big 5 publisher, even an independent publisher. That would be like a dream come true. I've had that dream since I was like 10 years old. So I want to do as much research as possible before I start this process again, because I did query back in 2017. It was my very first book that I'd ever written. It was a young adult cyberpunk. And I basically didn't know what I was doing. I queried way earlier in the process than I should have. I got a few little bites, but no takers. But I had no idea what I was doing. And querying is so exciting because it means that you're like, you finished a book and you're ready to try to get it published. But it's also so scary because the publishing industry moves at a glacial pace. I've taken a couple of conferences like this, or like I've taken courses like this before through Readsy, which I always have a code that you guys can use for like 10% off. I think it's always in the description box if you guys are interested. So I was able to attend this most recent conference, which was just like a 1-day, 4-hour conference, all about literary agents and querying and all the things that you really do need to know before you start the process of trying to get your book published. The whole goal of this conference was to sort of demystify the whole process, because it can feel like the first roadblock is just like not knowing how the industry works and not knowing like how to start the process of like who to send your book to. So the first person that they brought in was Ashley Lopez, and she is an editor and a literary agent. And she gave a lot of really interesting advice, some of which I had heard just from like educating myself on YouTube, some of which I'm glad that I took the conference and I attended, because there are things that I have that I have thought about doing that she advised not to. So it's probably a good thing that I attended the course. But she mainly broke down the differences between types of publishing. So you have the big 5, I'll put them on the screen. I think most of them are based in New York. And if you open a random book, like if I opened a random book on my bookshelf, most likely one of those 5 would come up very quickly, if not be the first book that I opened. Next, under that, you have independent publishers, and they're still very sought after, but they're just not one of the big 5. And then after that, you would have university presses, which I have been published in before. One of my, it was a vampire story back when I was on my vampire kick, as a lot of us were, kind of post Twilight. They gave me $500. It was a mother-daughter vampire story. That was a university press. That was actually for a contest. It was a writing contest. Then off to the side, you have self-publishing, which is a whole beast in and of itself. Next, she talked about when are you actually ready for an agent, and you do really need to have an actual full finished manuscript. This was something that's been on my mind the last couple of weeks as I near the end of the editing process of editing draft 1 into what will eventually become draft 2. Is like, if I'm getting close, my thought was like, I know it takes months for agents to get back to you. So why don't I go ahead and just query now? I can cut out that waiting process. You know, the sort of worst case scenario is an agent actually gets back to you like in a relatively timely manner, and then you don't have a manuscript ready to send to them. Then it automatically sets you up to look like really unprofessional, and that is not good. Now, there are some cases where you write a proposal, and then that's where you're proposing to write a book and you have the concept, but you don't have a manuscript. Leigh Bardugo, 6 of Crows. She sold that on proposal. I recently watched a TED Talk that she did. So in that case, she had already published a couple of books, and her publisher trusted her enough to come up with the next book without having to actually see it first. And then she did mention all the places to find the agents, because this is going to be the most time-consuming process. This is the process that I think I probably dread the most, is going through like Publishers Marketplace or Manuscript Wishlist and just compiling a list of agents to send to, because there's so many different things. You have to make sure that they actually are interested in reading your genre. She said a good place to start is to just like figure out like who are your favorite authors, and then go to the back of the book, like go to the acknowledgments and see who the agent was. Like literally just kind of like, you know, steal the agent out of the book, and then you'll know who to query. It is a very time-consuming process. She did mention making sure that you have like a spreadsheet where you can keep everything organized, because every single agent is going to want something slightly different, and you do have to follow their instructions to a T. I do remember writing these down on index cards when I was doing this for the first time. That being like really tricky to try to keep track of, like, okay, who had requested some material from me? How long had it been since I originally submitted? Was it time yet to kind of remind them, like, you know, had 1 or 2 months gone by? Because at some point you can send a gentle reminder email, but I think I'm definitely going to stick to the spreadsheet this time. Don't email multiple agents at the same agency. That's a big no-no. Once they reject you, then you can, you know, query the next agent at that agency. You never want to resubmit to an agent who's declined you. That's a big no-no. Don't submit to all of the agents who you have on your list at once. You want to submit to, I think she said anywhere from like 10 to 15. I remember I was doing like 5 at a time back in 2017. Also, it will slow down during the winter holiday time. So she was saying, you know, just be prepared if you submit something in, you know, November, December, that agents are going to be backed up when they come back to work in January. You may not hear something for even longer if you submit at the end of the year. And then the next person was very exciting. Her name was Katie, and she formerly the senior commissioning editor at HarperCollins, which is one of the big 5 publishers. Very interesting insights from her. She kind of explained like what are the things that actually makes an editor fall in love with a story, and these are kind of like the things that you need to do with your manuscript before you even approach the literary agent, which comes before the editor. So she said the 3 big things that are sort of like the perfect storm or the perfect alchemy is the pitch, the plot, and the pacing. So like the 3 Ps. The pitch has to grab the attention, obviously. Like it has to sound interesting. Then the plot, obviously, it needs to sustain their interest and sustain their attention. And then that goes right into pacing. She says, is there enough happening to make me turn the page? So obviously some books are not page turners, like something like literary fiction, but you still need to be giving the reader a reason to continue reading. One of the most interesting things that she said that I remember was, she said, make them forget that they're reading something for work. Just write such a good story and do the best that you can so that they are actually absorbed in what's going on. Your characters, your pacing, your plot, all of it. Make sure that it's the absolute best that you are presenting to them so that they almost feel like, well, how could I not publish this? Some of the questions that she says that she will ask to herself or other people when she's reading something is like, does this make me want to talk about it with other people? Is it saying something really interesting? Is it commenting on something about our society or our culture that's really interesting and innovative? You do get like a whole team of people helping you with traditional publishing, which is amazing. And that's the thing that I'm most excited for, is to have like a marketing team and graphic designers and all the things at your disposal. That is why you are paying your agent the 15% cut that they get out of all of your paychecks, all of your, your advance, all the things, all the, if you do end up making royalties at some point, they will always get 15% for the life of the book. That is how they live. That is how they eat. That's their paycheck. And then another thing that she mentioned, and this is kind of where you see the actual like heart and the human behind the editor come into play. I know with rejection is hard. It's just kind of part of the game. But she said a lot of times it's a warm pass is what it's called. A warm pass means an editor is ultimately saying no, but it's not because they didn't actually like the book, and it's not because it's a bad book. You know, she will be really interested in a story, but if she doesn't think that she is the perfect person, if she doesn't think that she is the one who sees a vision and can see the book going places and feels like, you know, she is the right person to take the book into reality, then she's going to pass on it, and hopefully it lands, you know, in the right person's lap. She broke down like the hierarchy of like the acquisitions meeting and how she, the editor, takes the book to the publisher, the marketing director, the publicity director, and the salesperson. They are like the next higher up echelon, and they are the ones who also get a say in whether the book is published, I believe. And then above that, you also have the commercial director and the CEO. So your book has to go through all of these people before it actually gets a yes, which is why I think it's like 1% or something like that of books that are submitted to an agent or to an editor. It's only like 1% of them that actually get published because so many people in the process have to say yes. And she also answered some questions about author platform. So like something like YouTube, having a YouTube presence, having an Instagram presence, having a TikTok presence. She said really, unless you like are known for that and that's why you're writing a book, it really doesn't matter, which is good news, because most people don't. Most people do not have, thousands of followers on those platforms, or if they do, it just doesn't really drive a lot of sales. It really does come back to the book. It comes back to your work that you submitted to them. So all the external stuff, they said, yeah, sure, if you have a big following, obviously, that might mean that there's some built-in sales, but ultimately it's, your book that they are actually going up to bat for, not whether or not you have 1 million subscribers. Another brief thing that was mentioned was tropes and comp titles. They are important to mention in the query letter because you have to let the editor know and the agent know what they are getting themselves into. I remember when I queried the first time, this was not something I don't think that I did very well. In hindsight, I realized that I wrote a cyberpunk book. And did I mention the word cyberpunk anywhere in my query letter? No, I did not, because I didn't know what I was doing. So that's an example of mentioning tropes, genres, comp titles, meaning books or, TV shows, movies that have come out within the last 3 to 5 years. So they do have to be pretty recent. Those are all very important to put in your query letter because it lets the editor know what the heck they're about to get themselves into. I think there's nothing worse than, them liking a character or they like the pitch, like the query letter really grabbed them, and then you have a whole bunch of typos, or they can tell this is maybe just like a draft 1, draft 2, and it's taking them out of the story so much that they ultimately pass on it and they don't offer you representation. That is what I am doing with my book for sure. I'm going to hire a developmental editor. I'm going to pay to have that done relatively soon, probably at the beginning of 2026. I posted my chapter 1 on YouTube for the entire internet to rip apart so that I could know how to improve it. So that is a huge factor in you getting the attention of an agent or an editor, is just making sure it's as polished as it could possibly be. I think because people know that, a whole team of people is going to be working on it and that you're going to have editing opportunity in the future, I think maybe there's a misconception that it doesn't need to be totally 100% polished because it's just going to get edited some more, but really you want to make sure it's as best as you can make it before you submit. Yeah, if you want me to. Basically, ultimately, what I gathered was that even though it does seem like this almost impossible task, because of how many people want to be traditionally published and how many kind of hoops you have to jump through, essentially, they want good books. They just want a good book. They love a good story. Boyfriend is calling. I must go and watch him juggle. So I'm gonna leave you for now, but thank you so much for all of your comments, and yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.